Social control is a concept that refers to the ways in which people's thoughts, feelings, appearance, and behavior are regulated in social systems. One way this is done is through coercion, from imprisoning those who commit a crime to physicians administering drugs that make difficult patients more manageable. Social control, however, is mainly done through socialization, in which people come to identify with the social system and its values and norms, thereby acquiring a stake in maintaining those values and norms. Mechanisms of social control. Every society has devised various mechanisms to exercise control. Social control mechanisms are viewed by sociologists as all those social arrangements that prevent such strains as may develop from the individual's place in the social structure and prevent the strains from leading to deviance. Every society has certain means to exercise social control, and there are clear consequences of exercising social control for promoting stability and conformity in societies. Types of mechanism. Mechanisms of social control can be classified into the following 4 categories. Preventive mechanisms. These mechanisms are designed to prevent such situations from developing that might lead to deviant socialization, social pressures, establishment of role priorities. Force are some of the mechanisms through which conformity is promoted or the occurrence of deviance is prevented. One such example in present days is the imposition of curfew. Mechanisms to manage tensions. Institutionalized safety valves like humor, games and sports, leisure, religious rituals are regarded as outlets for the tensions generated by social restraints and cultural inconsistencies within a society. Mechanisms to check or change deviant behavior. Sanctions are used by every society to bring about conformity and check or change deviant behavior. Sanctions have been classified into psychological sanctions. Negative sanctions are reproof, ridicule, non-acceptance, ostracism, etc. Positive sanctions include acceptance in the group, praise, invitation to inner circle events, verbal or physical pat on the back gifts, etc. Physical sanctions. These are mostly negative. The most important forms of physical sanctions are expulsion, physical punishment, and extermination. Excommunication, a mechanism of social control. A judicial magistrate court in Pochampalli in Krishnagiri district of Tamil Nadu recently had ordered excommunication of a man for 1 month from his village for indulging in illegal sale of liquor. According to police, P. Nazar of Veppalampatti village near Santur in Pochampalli Taluk was arrested by the Prohibition and Enforcement Wing for selling liquor illegally at a premium rate after the business hours of Tasmak outlets. A case was registered under the Tamil Nadu Prohibition Act and he was produced before the judicial magistrate K. Srinivasan at Pochampalli. Hearing the arguments, the magistrate ordered for excommunication of the accused for a month from his village, said a release from the police. Economic sanctions. These include positive rewards like promotion of a loyal, sincere worker, grant of tenders to civic-minded businessmen, etc. Or negative sanctions like threat of loss or reduction in one's income. Example, threat of discharge by employer may prevent the employee from continuing his strike, economic boycott, etc. The February 2013 sanctions by the United States against Iran, which dealt one of the harshest blows to the Iranian economy in recent times, aimed at cutting off access to oil revenues. They require an already reduced pool of oil importers to pay into locked bank accounts that Iran can access only to purchase non-sanctioned goods in that country or humanitarian supplies. If importers do not comply, they face the threat of being shut out of the US financial system. The US has granted sanctions exemptions to China, India, and 7 other countries to import Iranian oil. Only 6 are currently importing oil, according to the government. The US reached the estimates by looking at Iran's trade imbalances with oil importers based on customs data from each of the relevant countries. The figures show Iran cannot spend the full amount it earns because it is limited to buying only non-sanctioned goods for imports from the small pool of trading partners. And it is not able to repatriate the money to fill its foreign reserve coffers or cover any budget shortfalls. Propaganda mechanisms. Another important mechanism that can bring about change in the desired direction is propaganda or molding public opinion. Propaganda is a deliberate attempt to control the behavior and interrelationships of members in order to change their feelings, attitudes, and values. For example, the efforts of the government to control population growth through family planning propaganda. Means of social control. As mentioned earlier in this unit, social control may denote the various specialized means employed by a society to maintain order. It may also be used to categorize institutions insofar as they contribute specifically to order and stability. Let us examine some of these in detail. Custom. Social codes found in every society provide standardized ways of doing things. These ways, known as customs, have come to be accepted in the group or society. Some degree of pressure is always exerted on the individual to make one conform to customs. In case they are violated, the group applies some sanctions or penalties of varying degrees of severity. The severity would depend on the importance attached to the particular customary regulation. Custom is sustained by common acceptance. Informal social pressures are brought to bear in the case of violation of customs. Violation of modes, on the other hand, inspire intense reaction, and the punishment may involve expulsion from the group, harsh ridicule, imprisonment, or in some cases even death. To function effectively in a culture, it is imperative that one learns the appropriate folk ways, customs and conventions, and modes of that culture. Let us now see the role of law as a means of social control. Law. Certain norms become laws when a society feels strongly about them. Laws are formal standardized expressions of norms enacted by legislative bodies to regulate certain types of behavior. Laws not merely state what behaviors are permitted and not permitted, but they also state the punishment for violating the law. As we shift from simple societies to the modern ones, the role of law as a mechanism of social control assumes greater significance. In modern complex societies, the more informal types of social control are weakened. Though law may itself be based on custom, it has three distinct characteristics which separate it from custom. First, it has politicality, as it is upheld by the political authority of the state. Second, it has uniformity, as it is applicable throughout the jurisdiction of the state on all groups or parts of society. Third, it has penal sanction, as each law is enforced on the strength of penalty imposed by the state in case of violation. There are distinct agencies such as police, courts, prisons, etc. to enforce the law. However, when a law does not reflect folk ways and mores, its enforcement is likely to be ignored or given low priority. For example, even though the minimum age at marriage for girls and boys in India is fixed by law, many communities ignore these prescriptions. When there is a conflict between custom and law, it becomes difficult to impose the law. We will now turn to the role of religion. Religion. Sociologists are interested in studying how religion is organized and what impact it has on the members of a society in terms of controlling their behavior. They are also interested in the kinds of belief system developed by people in different situations and circumstances, and how religious beliefs change over time as external situations and circumstances change. All religions are seen to have the following elements: things considered sacred, a set of believers, a set of rituals and ceremonies, a system of beliefs such as a creed, doctrine or a holy book, a certain form of organization. Religion contributes to stability and order in society in that it reinforces social norms, providing sanctions for violation of norms and reinforcing basic values. Today, with the explosion of scientific knowledge, some customs, religious and moral interpretations of behavior are no longer considered binding or accepted. The sacred books of most of religions include rules for ordering social relationships. It is especially explicit about matters pertaining to the family, marriage, divorce, and inheritance. Though laws are challenging, some of the practices upheld by religious teachings, beliefs, and experiences associated with religion are still seen to be essential for both personal identity and social cohesion. Education, too, is an important means of social control. Let us see how this is so. Education. The institution of education helps to control human behavior through socialization of the young and adult members of society. The different levels of formal education transmit the culture of society to individuals within the society. In discharging their socialization function, schools and colleges transmit many of the society's values. The individuals learn to conform to rules, be honest, be diligent, and to cooperate with others, etc. Another value of education is that it prepares students for their adult occupational roles. Education is further valued for the understanding it imparts about the social and physical environment. However, the fact that education tries to impact such values is no indication that everyone who goes to school and college learns and accepts these values. Were the educational system and educators and other socializers always successful, there would be no deviance and no social conflict. This brings us to the topic of family. Family. Across the world, the institution of family performs certain important functions. These include socialization, imparting of affection and emotional support, regulation of sex and reproduction. Family is not only an important agency of socialization, but of social control as well. It is in the family that an individual normally has his most intimate and important social relation. Some of human beings' most basic needs, both physical and psychological, are fulfilled within the family. Though the more formal and more coercive measures of social control are generally absent in the family, other informal means such as ridicule, criticism, disapproval, loss of prestige, withdrawal of rewards, etc. are very potent means of control. In fact, an individual always seeks emotional support of his or her near and dear ones in the family in times of stress and tension. The mere threat of withdrawal of this support is sufficient to bring the recalcitrant member back into line. Every family has its own set of moral values and customs. These are enforced upon its members, particularly the younger ones, through disciplinary measures and a system of rewards and punishments. We now turn to leadership. Leadership. It can play a very important role in social control. It develops out of the process of interaction itself. Leaders have guided the destinies of groups, communities, and nations. If the leader enjoys group support, his or her suggestions and directions lead the members towards some common values and goals and may help to promote order and stability in society. In this process, mass media can play a very important role. Mass media. In traditional smaller societies, face-to-face contact was the only means of communication. In modern technological societies, the media of mass communication, such as newspapers, radio, and television, are a means of not only communication but also of social control. Much of the public opinion and propaganda, for example, and other social and cultural groups make use of those means to mold public opinion and to change or control attitudes and behavior of the vast mass of population. New values and lifestyles, fashions, wants, ideas, etc. are thrust upon the public with a view to redirect and control their behavior in a particular way. We will now consider the role of force in social control. Force. Though some sociologists have neglected or underemphasized the element of force or physical coercion in social relationships, the role of force in social control cannot be underestimated. In some types of societies, such as the totalitarian states and colonial regimes, physical force and violence are used as significant instruments of control. In fact, it can be asserted that physical violence is the oldest and ultimate means of social control. Even modern liberal democratic societies maintain police and armed forces. This signifies the fact that the resort to force and violence is the ultimate answer to many issues, when other means have failed. On the other hand, communal and caste violence are examples of how force is used by interested groups to control and coerce each other, though it is not legally sanctioned. Consequences of social control. Though social control is seen as necessary for promoting continuing stability and conformity in societies, it can become dysfunctional at times. The following are some of the dysfunctional aspects of social control. Exploitation. Social control may sometimes become a subtle means of exploitation. Some of the dominant groups or individuals may simply use it to fulfill their own vested interests. These interests may be political, economic, or social. In such cases, the real motivations are hidden under the cover of some laudable objectives. A ruling party may try to perpetuate its rule, or a business firm may try to sell its substandard goods by means of utilizing the techniques of social control. Inhibiting reform and change. Social control may have limiting consequences in that it may sometimes inhibit creativity and obstruct attempts at constructive reforms and social changes. Social control may also exert enormous amount of emotional and psychological pressures on some individuals. The best example is that of the institutions such as the prisons and mental hospitals. The strict regime and oppressive atmosphere sometimes create mental tensions and even illnesses among them. Similarly, where parents have very strict standards of discipline, their children's personalities do not develop in a normal way. In repressive police states, many individuals likewise suffer from stress and tension. Thus, the individual has to pay a price for social control in psychological terms. Social tensions. Social control may also lead to social tensions, particularly in a large complex society. Here, there may be different groups with their distinctive interests, norms, and values which may conflict with each other. When attempts are made by one or more groups to impose their own standards on others, conflict and struggle become inevitable. Limits of social control. Effectiveness of social control is limited due to the following factors. Each group is organized around norms and values. Social control is intended to check deviation from these standards. Yet it is not possible to contain deviation completely. Some deviation from prescribed norms will always be there. Each group or society has to determine the limit of tolerance of deviant conduct and thus set a realistic limit on social control. The effectiveness of social control is also limited by the degree of consistency in the cultural directives. If the cultural prescriptions are uncertain and inconsistent, then social control cannot operate successfully. This is why in a rapidly changing society in which normative standards become inconsistent, mechanisms of social control are generally weak. Individuals may not know what is expected of them in a particular situation. In a complex society, it is not generally possible to impose social control uniformly on all groups which are divided on the basis of class, caste, religion, race, etc. Sometimes the uniform application of law also encounters numerous difficulties. In our country, despite the constitutional directive to have a uniform civil code, it has not been possible to evolve one so far. Social control implies huge economic costs to the society. The control of deviance requires a disappropriate share of societal attention and resources. Huge expenditure has to be incurred on the establishment of social control agencies such as the police, prisons, mental hospitals, etc. There is a limit beyond which a poor country such as ours cannot afford to deploy such resources at the cost of other development programs. In this and the previous lesson, we have focused on the nature, approaches, mechanisms, and consequences of social control. We discussed that social control is a pervasive feature of social life. Social control means that every society has some rules which have to be obeyed and some standards of conduct which have to be followed. This is so because no society can exist without social control. The twin goals of social control are to establish and maintain order in society and to check deviant tendencies and behavior. You also learned that different societies have different methods to exercise control. The two types discussed here are the formal and informal. Some of the important mechanisms discussed in this unit are custom, law, religion, education, family, leadership, mass media, force, etc. Then we also looked at some of the consequences of social control for the point of view of both the society and the individual. Finally, we pointed out some of the factors that limit the effectiveness.